Hello, everyone. I am Francine Bonjour-Carter, the creator of Reconnect. And this season in Reconnect, we are talking about voice. And I have a special guest with us, which I'm so happy to be with you, Lee Hunsaker, and to introduce everybody to Lee and to what Lee has to say to us about voice. Every month in Reconnect, we have a topic. And when I started to think about the topic of voice, the first person who came to my mind was Lee, because Lee is a storyteller herself, and she facilitates storytelling events, which are magical and powerful. And I can't wait to hear more about it. So welcome, Lee. Hi.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'd like to tell people about how we met before you introduce yourself and we dive deeper into our conversation, because I think it's interesting and totally related to what we talk about today.
Yes.
So Lee and I have been writing together for a few years now. We have the same writing mentor, Laura Lance, who is based in Hawaii, and we are part of one of her weekly groups. So we have met almost every week. We take breaks in between 6 or 7 week session for a few years, and we have prompts and inspiration, and we each write a little story. And then we read our stories to the group, which is very powerful and special. And to hear your stories, Lee, has always been like fireworks to me. It's a great, great experience. And I think your stories are like yourself. And I think that generally, when we have a space where we can express ourselves authentically and safely, we can really see how what we write is a pure reflection of who we are.
Mm.
And your story, Lee, your stories are always strong and colorful, tender, and very honest, which is an amazing combination. And I do think it really reflects the person you are. So I'm so happy to talk with you today about our topic of voice and storytelling. And I would love to know how you started this journey, this amazing adventure of
Yes.
facilitating storytelling events for others. So do you want to tell
Sure.
us more? Maybe tell us a little bit about where you are too.
Sure. Yes. Well, thank you for those beautiful compliments. And I'm, of course, a huge fan of your writing as well. I am based in Roanoke, Virginia. I grew up here in the Appalachian Mountains. I have a big old, loud, hilarious, complicated Southern family who I'm very connected with, and they are very much characters in most of my stories, for sure. Raised by a single mama and powerful, beautiful soul. And so my path is a crooked one, as are most paths. But I
Mhm.
was an English major, a creative writing major. Um, I was, into theater and all of the arts, and very much supported in that through my youth and college years. And I fell sort of happily accidentally into the film business in Austin, Texas. I ended up in Austin working there for 20 years in the film industry as a costume designer. And I've just always had a love of character, that I loved doing costumes because of what that represents of, meeting a character and sort of right away being able to imagine who they are. And I loved having characters inhabit their clothing and their environment. And so that tied in with my love of writing and storytelling was just sort of a natural fit for me. It felt right at the time until um, I was married. I got older, 16-hour days and living in hotel rooms and being still kind of a wild child was no
Mm.
longer sort of fitting fitting with the way I wanted to be living. And that coupled with a breast cancer diagnosis in 2008 when my son was only 17 months old. All of that sort of perfect storm created a wake up call of epic proportions. And realizing I could no longer live in that world of the film business, and knowing that I needed to make a change. And the only way I knew how to do that was to literally sort of remove myself from Texas. Um,
Mm.
it's being in that industry is almost like an addiction. It's just one more job, one more job, one more job. And um, I knew I had to cut ties. So I
Right.
literally ran away from Texas with my husband behind me. sort Mostly supportive, not knowing where we were going or what we were doing, but I missed the mountains and I missed my people and I missed my roots. And so ended up back here with an absolute identity crisis. Who am I now? This film business was my identity.
Right.
And so having to reinvent myself, and started sort of remembering what I've always loved, which is story and writing, and this area that's so rich with character and history and
Mhm.
trauma and drama and
Right.
surprises and all of the things that I love. So I started just holding, women's writing circles in my living room with, wine and fire and candles and tears and laughter and soup. And everyone was just hungry for it. And I mostly was hungry for it. Every
Right.
time I would have one of these gatherings, I would feel um, just empowered, and I could see the way the women leaving my house felt. And I knew that something magical was happening and I didn't want it
Mhm.
to end.
Mhm. Mhm.
And people, started saying, like, you're pretty good at leading these things. I think you should keep this going. So little by little, I offered a writing group at a brewery, and, that got sold out. I offered a writing group at the library. I started substitute teaching high school kids and they were loving it. And so each time I did that and put myself out there, um, the universe was just saying, you're onto something. And so through all the self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all the things we go through as, calling ourselves writers or artists, which feels
That's
like
right.
such a big deal.
Mhm.
I don't deserve that title. How could I? I started just becoming a little more confident in those roles. And I decided nothing here was going on with live storytelling in this, at least in my town, in this area.
Uh-huh.
And so um, I have friends that own a really cool coffee shop, and they have like fire pits in the front yard and hay bales and a beer garden. And I just said, let's try a live storytelling event. I know nothing, but I'm going to create a name, which became Hoot and Holler Stories, which is kind of a nod to the mountains. And created a Facebook page, came up with our first theme, similar to the moth, and invited
Right.
people to submit stories and writing first. And that gave me an idea of how it might be, told live. And, I had 12 stories within 24 hours, mostly people that I knew or was, associated with. So I knew that they could do the job. And we charged $5, and it was almost 200 people on our first event.
Wow.
Packed the yard, people kind of sitting on the stoops and, knee to knee and neighbor to neighbor and stranger to stranger. And the energy was electric. People they were leaned in, and there were tears and
Mm.
laughter, and the storytellers were on fire. And it was really like a rebirth for me at that moment.
Mm.
I knew that I had hit upon something that not only I needed for my own soul, but that our
Right.
community seemed to need. And so from there, that was 6.5 years ago. And
Wow.
from there, I've just done, event after
Kept
event. They're
growing.
they're sporadic. They're not monthly. I just sort of decide when, and we have moved on to bigger and
Yeah.
huger venues that we continue to sell out. And
Right.
now our home base is in a 1920s historic theater that has 325 seats, and it sells out every time.
That's
And
so
so
awesome.
it's just been, I mean, I use the word magic constantly because I believe in it, and I know you do too. And so it has felt absolute magical for me.
Right.
And so I just keep doing it, and now I get invited to speak at, women's conferences, and
Right.
I never knew what direction this would take, but I'm really
Yeah.
just going with it. I'm going with it because it feels right in my heart.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's
think that's what magic is.
yes,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
magic is really when you listen to what feels right in your heart and you dare, because it's a big daring to
Oh,
do
yeah,
it. And every time you make the choice to dare again, right?
yeah,
Yeah. It's such
absolutely.
it's a wonderful story. And there are so many things that so many directions we could take this conversation. I love how this came from a pretty painful phase of your life, right? And this transformation. I work a lot with the concept of transformation, initiation, transition, all this gooey, the gooey stuff that is going on when we are in the chrysalis, right? When we are transforming. And
Yes,
your story is just such a beautiful example of that. And to me, it talks about how we can like pass and reduce the outside noise, almost the superficial, the cultural noise, the labels noise, or the noise from what
mhm,
we were taught to do or believe or be, and come back to something essential, and then hook onto that and say, okay, that's how I'm gonna walk in my life now. And it's very courageous, and it's, again, it comes from a place of maybe, pain and fear, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But it also is the soil that will feed, that has fed your dream for you, right? In your
that's right.
story. And I think it's
Yeah,
really beautiful. The alchemical process, right, of taking all of that and staying with what you believe and with who you are really in your heart, and finding out who you are in your heart, because that's the part of this process, right? And have all of
absolutely.
that feed the future, right?
Absolutely. And when I was going through chemo and all of those really darkest of dark days, I would be reading books or, listening to podcasts or whatever it was to get myself through. And there was always this sort of cliche. I thought it was a cliche at the time about the gifts of cancer. And it made me furious.
I'm sure.
I was like, I don't want to be called a warrior. I don't want to be on this journey. I don't want this to be a gift. I want my old life back, So
Yeah.
I never could get there. I never could see it as a spiritual, dark night of the soul at all, especially when I was in it. And I do know a lot of women that are capable of that. I was
Right.
absolutely terrified and mad, and I could not see even like the next day, much less now 16 years
Cool.
later. I couldn't. And so I think I reluctantly say that coming to where I am now is a gift of cancer. But I feel
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to think I would have gotten here anyway, but probably
We
maybe
don't
not.
know.
We don't
Yeah.
know.
We
So,
don't know. Yeah.
it's a complicated relationship with that illness and that
Yeah.
period of my life, and giving it some credit, I guess.
Yeah. And
So,
and not idealizing or
no.
romanticizing
Right.
That's really not what I mean here. Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
But yes, this sort of rebirthing that has happened very organically, and meeting people like you and finding, through COVID, we met through I
Mm,
think COVID was just
right.
happening, and I know we
Yeah.
were all looking for some connection, and I
Yes.
know we all wish we could be in the room together, in real life,
That's
in real
right.
time, but finding those moments of being together was, for me, a lifesaver, and meeting
Yeah.
all of you through those writing circles, and I would
Absolutely.
conduct my own Zoom, writing workshops, and
Right.
people just couldn't wait for it. We needed it so badly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, and we still do.
We
Yeah.
still do. And I want
Yeah.
to talk about that, the
Yeah.
hunger of connecting through our stories, which is, and there's written stories and spoken stories, which go together and are different at the same time, I think.
Yes.
And there are, so it's all about expressing ourselves, right? And I think in the right places and communities, it's also having the possibility and the being allowed to express ourselves as we change. And that this week I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to be like the strong part of me, right? And in 2 weeks I'm going to be a total mess and really talk or write about I have no idea of anything and I'm lost and I'm stuck, and it's still me, right? And I think
Yes.
that is really powerful. And I think we don't have a lot of places like that in our culture.
Right.
And the written words and the spoken words are really two ways where we can clearly see who we are becoming, who we are not anymore, and all of that. And it's different from other art forms. And I was thinking before this conversation, I'm also a mixed media artist, and it's very easy to, go be at my art table, create a piece of mixed media in my journal or a card or whatever. And I know what stories I'm talking about, right? I know what experience I'm processing through my art. It might be painful, it might be difficult, it might be from my childhood, whatever.
Right.
But the person who will see this piece of art will not see that because it's not
Right.
explicit. They might have a feeling about, oh, that's intense, or that looks sad, like, how we react to pieces of art in general. But it is not words, so it is not
Yeah.
explicit. So it's more hidden, right?
Right.
But when you share a piece of writing or when you talk out loud about your story or read your writing, it's a whole different world.
Yes.
and
Yes.
and it's scary. It's
It
scary.
is. It's incredibly vulnerable to do
Yeah.
that. And the thing that I find more and more every time that I witness it, and I call it witnessing because it feels
Yeah.
holy to me that people trust me to share their stories. I can literally see sort of their spirits become lighter when they speak from their hearts. And that's what I tell people when when we're first beginning the process of the storytelling, building up from writing to getting it ready for the stage. Um, I have a responsibility as the curator to, first of all, the storyteller, and wanting to make sure that they feel safe and respected. But then it goes to another level when there's an audience involved, because I also feel responsible for them,
Mhm.
and kind of walking those lines. There's so many fine lines with sort of a story becoming like, therapy, and the audience doesn't
Yeah. Yeah.
want that, and I don't want that for the storyteller. The worst thing as having a live event is having people sort of shifting in their chairs, checking their watches, so there's so many nuances about speaking the truth powerfully without having it cross into self-help. And it's
Yes.
really it's like hair thin, those lines, and it's a challenge, and it's fun for me to find those moments where please speak from your heart, but let's keep it right on that line,
Right.
but the empowerment that comes with that, back to your point of speaking the truth, even if it's not pretty, and
Mhm,
especially if it's
mhm.
not pretty,
Yes.
is just it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And to see 300 people nodding their heads, whether or not that's their exact experience, whether or not they can relate to that exact story is kind of irrelevant, because they can relate to that emotion,
That's right.
or
Yes.
and that's beautiful. And that's what we learn in these writing circles
Yeah,
is
and in my program Reconnect, participants write a letter to each other, and they don't know, they have
yes.
never met, and I have people from everywhere,
Yeah.
English speaking countries, and it's exactly the same. It's like you don't know the person, which
Right.
actually might bring more freedom
Right.
into what you share.
Yeah.
And you might have totally different background and stories and upbringing, but we are all human. So we
Right.
relate to the emotions, to what makes us human and what really connects us to each other. So it's
Yeah.
not about the specifics and if you have the same story than I do at all,
Yes.
but it's really talking to each other from heart to heart.
Right. And I think too, there's such a tendency to want to fix it for someone else, and
Yeah.
that's a huge challenge too, is to just be the witness and just
Mhm.
listen without trying to help.
Yes.
And I think especially as women, how can I make this person feel better? How can I fix this experience for them? How can I fix this broken heart,
Yeah,
or this broken relationship that they have? And um, it's so freeing for everyone to realize you can't,
that's right.
and just be there without going in with your own story, without turning it into your
That's
own,
right.
like, oh, my grandmother was that way too, blah, 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 blah,
Yep.
and that's been something very valuable in these, again, in these writing circles where um, giving feedback, but not trying to fix.
Yeah.
Um, and
Or make it
it's a
about you.
challenge. Yes, it's a definite challenge for me too, for
Yeah,
sure. So as people do share these stories with me, um, meeting them where they are and not projecting into the future. Um, so it's definitely a challenge, and one that I welcome, and it
mhm,
keeps myself
mhm.
in check too.
Yeah, yeah, I
The
hear you.
story, there's not an ending right now, and this story will probably never end. This is an ongoing. We're not going to tie this one up in a beautiful bow.
That's right.
It
That's right.
is forever and ever. So
And that also addresses the perfectionist side that we all have, right? Because
yes,
a lot of people feel, oh, but I'm not, excuse me, I'm not a good writer, or I'm not a good storyteller, and this needs to be perfect, and this, but I don't think that's possible when we really come from our heart and when we share like our humanness again.
right.
And I'm a big fan of Martin Shaw, who is a big storyteller and mythologist. And he says that our incompletedness is our authenticity. And
That's
I love
beautiful.
that. And that just to understand that each of us, we're in a process, and most of the process is messy.
So
and
messy.
and that's what it is. That's what life is, right? But
Right.
how do you see when people come to be part of your event, how do you see this perfectionism and this fear of not being good, not being enough?
Mm.
How do you see
Yeah.
that at play?
Oh gosh. Yes. I mean, and you kind of said it too. Seeing a story in writing as opposed to telling it
Yeah.
is very different. So part of my process is I have them write out their story first, so that I can just kind of see, back to like
Right.
first grade, you know, a beginning, middle,
Yeah.
and an end, and you know, the arc and where can we go with this? And so often they think they're writing me with one story, and I, you know, with my sort of radar, like do 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 do, this is the story, right? This one, you know, phrase is, I need to hear more about this. So there's something about being a midwife,
Mhm.
a midwife
Mhm.
of story, where you can gently sort of help them move away all of that other stuff that feels like the story and get to the heart of the story. And sometimes I
Mm.
push people into uncomfortable, you know, squirmy
Yes.
places. And I tell them at the very beginning, this is going to be a process. And I sort of liken it to childbirth in many ways, even if it's a funny story,
Mhm.
because there's some digging that has to happen. There's some pushing.
Yes.
There's also something that feels so precious that needs to be included becomes sort of not important anymore, you know? So it's really, I love that process of working with storytellers for those, you know, 4 or 5 weeks leading up to an
Mm.
event, and really honing in on what an audience is going to respond to, because again, it's that responsibility too. Um, and and seeing people be willing to go a little bit deeper, has
Mhm.
been is beautiful to witness. And some people are resistant, of course, you know, and sometimes they cut out, you know, they just say, I'm not ready for this.
Right, right.
And some people want to keep it, you know, very up here. And
That's not what you do, is it?
I ask for a little more, I ask for a little more. So, it can
Yeah.
often become a whole different story than where it starts, and that
Mhm.
process is really fun, and it's really fun to talk to the storytellers after the event, you know, after maybe a couple of
Yes,
weeks,
I'm
and
sure.
see how it felt, you know, from where they started to where they ended up at that microphone. And you know, 9.99 times out of 10 they are grateful for the process, for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah. And
absolutely trust that. Yeah.
yeah, and I tell them when they're writing me, you know, their initial pitch, to not even worry about punctuation or getting it in exact order. You know, I always say, right from the heart, straight, you know, straight from the heart to the pen. Go, just
Yeah.
go, you know, and try not to edit yourself, because those are the juicy parts that we can begin to sort of piece out.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered
yeah.
your question at all, or,
It
but
does. It does.
yeah.
Um, so you and I have done spoken words together, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
it was online. I have done also. Did you do them both? I know you walked with them. Did you walk with them?
I
Yeah.
worked with them, yes,
Yeah.
when they came locally to do a show,
Right.
but no, I've
But
never,
did
I
you
mean,
work as an organization in the organization, or did you do?
no, I wish. They just kind of gave Hoot and Holler a shout out because
Okay.
I helped them promote it, and
Right.
yeah, but
Okay.
no, that's of course
But
is a dream, but I know you
right.
did.
I did, yeah, which was great. Like the process, as you said, like starting with a story and then going deeper into some details and releasing something that I was like, no, I really want to talk about
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
And the feedback of the other people in the community was really, really great. But so we did spoken words together with Laura
Mhm.
Lance, and I would love to know how you felt on that side of the experience,
Mm.
and if
Yes.
and how it made you see maybe differently or reinforced some of your teaching and how you organize your events.
Yes, that's a great question, because it is so different to be on the other side. And we were allowed to read for that event. I try
Mm,
to encourage my storytellers not to read, or to at least just use sort of bullet points,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
because there's nothing that loses connection. You know, if somebody is like this,
Yeah.
reading,
Yep.
and so there's a lot of sort of stage training that goes on as well of, making eye contact, using
Mhm.
your body, but not too much, and so
That's
all these
right.
sort of nuances. But yes, for me, that was, it sort of reinforced, uh, even though it was online, trying to engage, this group of strangers who I couldn't
Mhm.
see, wanting to use my facial expressions, for instance, um, and definitely editing that piece for the kind of real heart and soul and cutting out that
Right.
extraneous, this feels really important to me, but it doesn't serve the story. And that's a question, that I ask all the time. Does this part, this detail, does it serve the
Mhm.
story? And I
Mhm.
have storytellers think of their stories as a spider web. And so the kind of where the spider
Mm.
sits in the middle, and puts the web out there. Um, but always returning to that center, and using maybe the technique of echo, or a certain phrase a couple of times throughout the story to
Right.
tie it all together. So there's so many nuances to doing it live,
Yeah.
that takes some practice for sure. For sure. And I'm very good at dishing it out and I can't always take it. So that was good practice for me. I had to, sort
Yeah.
of practice what I preach. So
That's right.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always see stories as like the spirit of the story and how you feed them and how they feed you in return, and this whole, reciprocal relationship, right? That
Right.
it's growing. It's also in a process, and you are also in a process, and you meet together. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Um, I would like to hear about community from you. And
Mm.
so I always think that most of us are afraid of telling our stories because we are afraid of not being understood and not being accepted and not belonging, right? It's like the chain
Right.
of event. It all goes together.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us in these times, in this culture, feel really disconnected and lonely. I think loneliness is huge. It's very heavy on our
Yes.
culture. And events and community events like what you do are such a breath of fresh air, right? And such a
Yes.
connective, generative place for people to be seen, to see others, to it's all these sparkles. And I think that also talks a lot about who you are, this very sparkling person, and how you're like the little sparkle master, and you put these little sparkles in people's hearts, right? But it's so important. And I wonder, what are your thoughts about how can we feed and grow that, this
Mm.
story sharing, this community witnessing, and being together?
Yes, that's a huge part of what feeds me. I mean, it's the part that feeds me is the way that I know that the audience is going to leave having
Mhm.
been changed in some way. They're going to
Right.
go home or go to dinner or go to the bar next door and they're going to talk about all the things they just heard. Typically, I have
Mhm.
6 to 8 stories, each about 10 minutes long. Um, and there's going to be something that happened in that event, in that sacred room. They're going to leave that theater, go home, go to their office tomorrow, go to their wherever, their book club, wherever it is, and talk about what they heard and talk about how they felt. And they are taking those very sparkles, and I use the word sparkles too,
Mm.
and they're spreading it a little bit. It's sort of like a beautiful glitter bomb, a story glitter bomb of, it continues to reverberate throughout, you know, first in the room, then out onto the street, then to the, then home, then the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And it feels like, a beautiful ripple effect of healing to me. Um, I've seen perspectives change. I've seen opinions changed. I've seen, I had one of my favorite, every event is my favorite, but
Mhm.
one that was particularly sort of incredible to be a part of was I did coming out stories back in October for
Yes.
National Coming Out Day. And I had 8 storytellers, most of whom had never shared their process of coming out, because it's never just, a
Yeah,
moment in time.
that's
And
right.
trying to put that in a 10-minute, it's a
Yeah,
lifetime of story, but, distilling that down to
that's
10
right.
minutes and having them stand up on the stage and bravely face an audience of strangers and proclaim, "This is who I am. I'm standing in my
Mm.
power." Um, and people I know for sure came there skeptical, maybe just with a sort of preconceived notion of what, a gay person is or a trans
Mhm.
person, and coming out profoundly changed with their hearts opened because they saw a one-on-one, they saw a real live person. They
That's
didn't see it
right.
on TV, they didn't read a news article, they didn't
Yes.
listen to the political noise. They saw a living, breathing human being coming through to the other side of finding themselves. I mean,
That's
who
right.
doesn't love a story like that? Who doesn't love a person
Mhm.
standing in their power, in their voice? So, moments like that where stories can literally, I think, transform and change minds, those are golden. Those are
Mm.
gold. Or just to see an audience laughing their heads off, like literally doubled
Right,
over laughing.
right.
How much do we all need that? So
Oh my
it's
God,
all
yes.
healing. It's all healing.
Yeah,
And I think it leaves the room and it goes out into the world. I
yeah,
really believe it. I feel it when I'm up there. I can feel the energy of it changing people.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
I
again, it's
totally
that
believe it.
magic. It's the magic. Yeah,
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 absolutely. Oh my
yeah.
God. Yeah, that's like it's simple and it's all we need, right? To see each other
Right,
for who we are in our simple, messy process
right.
and and from the heart. It's really simple when you talk about it like that, right?
It should be.
It
Yes, I
should
think it
be.
is. Yes, it should
Yeah,
be. It's
yeah,
literally just human beings being human. I mean, it's
that's right.
really, and it is messy and complicated. And yes, bad things happen to us. But there's also these juicy moments of connection and being heard, that
Yes,
and people understanding that they are worthy and that their stories are worthy.
exactly.
Stories don't have to be these sweeping, dramatic, epic,
That's right.
tales of,
That's right.
centuries long. They can be about a trip to the grocery store. It
Yeah,
can be a
exactly.
tiny human moment where you were just alive. I mean, we all need to
Exactly.
give
Yeah,
ourselves a
that's right.
credit. Like we've made it. The fact that we're living and breathing
Yeah.
is
Yes,
in and of itself a miracle.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
we should celebrate that and talk about our trip to Kroger.
I agree. Yeah. And and I think it's also making people really aware that we all have a voice and we can all use it. And have using your voice doesn't mean that you're gonna shout louder than your neighbor or that you're gonna express yourself without any thoughts and respect and just say things the way you want.
Yes,
It's more profound than that. It is more profound, and it's really using our voice as an agent of connection with each other. Right.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I've worked with people who are just like, I think I have
Yeah.
a story for this, but I don't
Right.
know. And then
Yeah.
those are the very people who stand up there and as they sort of take that first breath and the lights are down and
Yeah.
they stand in that, the spotlight and feel the love. It's literally like love is being hurled at them from our audience. I mean, it's like, oh, the hairs
Oh
stand
my
up.
God.
And for
Yeah.
them to just take that in before they say that first word. And
Yeah.
yeah, the first few words are shaken. They're shaking.
Yes.
And
Yes.
by the end, they are up there like a hallelujah because they have found it. It's come into its own. They've come into their power. And it
Yes.
is the coolest thing to watch.
Oh my God, I'm
It's
sure. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Such a
Yeah.
gift. You are such a gift. What you do is such a gift. I'm just happy that I'm happy to know that you're doing what you're doing. And it's very inspiring. And every time I'm like, oh, I want to do something like Lee, you know, like I just want you to go everywhere
Me
and
too.
do what you do everywhere.
Yes, believe me,
So,
that's a dream, You got a
yeah,
beach
well.
house in Mexico, let's go. No.
No, I have a house in Philadelphia. There's no beach right here,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but we could talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I feel that way too, and again, it's been for me sort of working through that imposter, I did not invent
Yeah,
this, I did not.
right.
But I have been able to give myself some credit because I do know how to put people together, and I do know how to make them feel heard. And so, yes, I'm in a town of 100,000 people, and I'm not changing the world, but I'm changing our community a little bit
Yes.
at a time, and I'm
Yeah.
certainly helping to change the lives of those storytellers. I know
Yeah.
that, and I see that, so that feels really rewarding for sure. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And you
so
can take all the credit you want, baby. I think that's really, yeah. Yeah, you should. Yeah. I'm really, really, really glad to know you, to be able to have this conversation with you. And as we are wrapping up, I would love to know if you have a word of wisdom or something you can tell my community and everybody who will
Mm,
be listening to our conversation about maybe the first step, right? So I know a lot of people write in their journal or write letters to each other through my program. So what's the next little push that you would
mm.
suggest to really find your voice and use your voice and create this little sparkle in somebody else?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would suggest maybe finding in your community, maybe an open mic, a poetry night or something. Don't get up there at first. Go and just listen first. I think that that's a great sort of just, dipping a toe is to just go be in the room live if possible.
Yes.
Otherwise, of course, there are thousands of online events, but if you can be in the room, um, that I never did hoot and holler online. I could have, but
Yes.
it's in the room for me is that's the energy. But just go listen. Sit in the very back of the room if you want. But watch the person on the stage or at the coffee shop or wherever it is. And feel the feeling of being in there at first. And then, go home or go to your car. Maybe you'll be so inspired and just write down the way it felt, maybe. Or maybe a line came to you while you were there. Just start by being in it peripherally at first.
Yeah.
And then, maybe there'll be a call for the next open mic. And maybe you'll try a 5-line poem, a paragraph even, maybe
Right.
you'll feel
Yeah.
brave enough to throw your name in the hat to stand up there. And listen to podcasts, listen to voices, listen to your own voice. And this is something I also tell
Mm.
storytellers is record yourself. you just read it, but read what you wrote,
Right.
record yourself, and play it back for yourself, and listen to your own voice. Talk to yourself when you're walking the dog, when you're in the shower, when
Mm.
you're driving. Get used to
Yes,
the sound of your
of your
voice. I mean, it's
voice. Yeah.
literally that simple. Is fall in love with the sound of your own voice. And I know we all are like, I hate to hear my but try really hard not to have
Yes.
that negative stuff in your head, and just listen to the way you sound, listen to your cadence, listen to your inflection, and just read yourself something you wrote, maybe.
Hmm.
And then
That's great.
maybe you want to play it for your best friend. So just start in these baby ways that don't feel scary. You don't need to suddenly stand
Right.
up there, or you can, maybe you want to. I'm all for it, but just dip a toe, and be in the room in whatever way feels good at
Hmm.
first, and
Yeah.
talk to people afterwards. Go tell that poet that what resonated with you. People love to hear that their voice matters like that,
I
so
think
just
that's
say
important.
thank you. Yeah. You don't
Yes.
have to even discuss what just say thank you.
Yeah.
um, and that's those sparkles again. The
That's
person
right.
reading
That's
or
right.
reciting, will feel gratitude, and so that's the way it spreads for me. So that's my advice, is to just
Yeah.
baby step it in.
Yeah. These are all great tips. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh
you
my God.
so much.
I have like 500 other things in my head that I could talk about with you. So maybe we'll do another one.
We'll do it
Um,
at the beach house.
that's right. That's right. Oh, thank you so much, Lee, for
Thank you, and
being
thank you.
here with us today. I really, really appreciate, and I can't wait to see how your journey unfolds and how Hoot and Howler is going to grow and touch people more and more, like deeper and deeper. I think that's so beautiful. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I adore
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.